This is Christopher Sernaque, hosting episode 3 of season 2 of the Current Topics in Science podcast. This podcast will address breaking scientific news in light of the origins debate and host interviews with scientists. This podcast is available on the following platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcast, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Video recordings of the podcast will be uploaded to YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Does luck exist? Well, lucky for us, there is an article on Psychology Today called Why You Should Believe in Luck. Dr. Craig Dowden wrote, "If you feel luck is stable and within your sphere of influence, you are much more likely to persevere toward your goals. However, if you see luck as an essentially random phenomena, you may wonder, what's the point? This skepticism can effectively undermine your desire to push on." We can ask another question along the same lines. What is the luckiest number? On a website called The Conversation, there's an article called Why 7 is the Luckiest Number. Now, whether or not luck exists and whether or not 7 really is the luckiest number, Boeing, back in January of 2020, released a new airplane called the Boeing 77X. The first Boeing 77X made its maiden flight on January 25th in Everett, Washington. Concerning the Boeing 77X, popular science author Rob Verger wrote, "When the new wide-body 77X enters service, it will seat as many as 426 people in its longest of two configurations. But while the size of the plane's fuselage is what allows it to carry so many people, it's the design of the wings that really sets it apart from an engineering perspective. The wings on the Boeing 77X aircrafts measure to about 235 feet from tip to folding tip. In regard to the impressive wingspan of the planes, Mark Drella, an MIT aeronautics and astronautics professor, said, "A wing pushes down on the air. The longer the wingspan, the more the air can push it down." The new designs have been in the making for years. In fact, according to Aerospace Testing International author Ben Sampson, Boeing and NASA have been researching and testing similar designs for almost a decade. This project, conducted by NASA and Boeing Research and Technology, is called SUGAR, or Subatomic Ultra-Green Aircraft Research. NASA's Advanced Air Transport Technology project team is currently working on developing a truss-braced winged airplane. According to Rob Verger, NASA's Walls says that the new wing configuration could be responsible for saving some 9% of fuel burn on a future TTBW plane. The idea is that the trusses on the wings will help keep the wings from breaking and will keep them steadier. Verger goes on to write, "Large trusses provide the necessary support, giving the structure another connection point to the fuselage and prevent runaway flatter. Another issue is weight. Long, skinny wings without trusses might have to be so stiff and heavy that it would negate the fuel savings." Now, besides having amazing caps, NASA is a pioneer in scientific advances. These amazing aircrafts are part of NASA's larger vision, which is to discover and expand knowledge for the benefit of humanity. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration was founded in the year 1958 in the month of October. Back then, the director of NASA's Space Flight Center was a man by the name of Dr. Wernher von Braun. Dr. von Braun paved the way for our modern cell phones, GPS, satellite radio, internet, and Doppler radar. In addition to these great feats, Dr. Jerry Bergman said, "Wernher von Braun, more than any other scientist, brought us into the space age." The NASA Earth Observatory website says, "Wernher von Braun is, without doubt, the greatest rocket scientist in history. His crowning achievement as head of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center was to lead the development of the Saturn V booster rocket that helped land the first men on the moon in July 1969. Dr. von Braun received his Ph.D. at the age of 22 in physics from the Humboldt University of Berlin. Under Dr. von Braun's leadership, his team of 80 scientists and technicians launched the first true rocket in 1942, as it was the first man-made object to reach the threshold of space. Dr. von Braun was also the leader of the scientists who placed America's first satellite, Explorer 1, into orbit on January 31st, 1958. The former assistant director for aeronautics of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, Frederick C. Durant, spoke highly of Dr. von Braun, saying, "Future historians may well note this century, or millennium, as significant in that mankind took its first tentative steps into space. In accomplishing these steps to the moon and beyond, Wernher von Braun was an eminent leader. He not only had a dream, but he made his dream come true for all of us." As you can see from this clip of Dr. von Braun, he was both a visionary and a genius.
Dr. Wernher von Braun, who is at present the chief of the Guided Missile Division of the Army's Rocket Center at Redstone Arsenal. He was also overall director of the development of the original V-2 rocket.
Now here's a model of my design for a four-stage orbital rocket ship. Compared to the unmanned instrument rocket, it is quite large, but the overall size and weight of the rocket is mainly determined by the 11 tons weight of this top section. This weight dictates the amount of fuel and the numbers of motors needed to produce enough power to equalize the gravitational pull of the Earth. The payload in the top section will consist of 10 crew members plus equipment. Notice the wings, small rocket motor, and landing gears. This is a section that must ultimately return the men to the Earth safely.
Critics of Dr. von Braun have attempted to paint him as a Nazi sympathizer because his rocket technology was used in Nazi Germany's war effort. In response to this, Dr. von Braun said, "The drug which cures when taken in small doses may kill when taken in excess. The knife in the hands of a skillful surgeon may save a life, but it will kill when thrust just a few inches deeper. Thus, it does not make sense to ask a scientist whether his drug or knife is good or bad for mankind." While Dr. von Braun initially supported the German war effort and rocket program, he called Adolf Hitler a pompous fool and was arrested and jailed by the Gestapo for resisting the military use of his rockets. According to David Kopedge, who was a system administrator for the Cassini mission to Saturn from 1997 to 2011, Dr. von Braun had argued for better treatment of the prisoners and was devastated when he heard the news that his rockets had been used against Allied cities. According to Dr. Jerry Bergman, in September of 1944, von Braun objected to the thousands of V-2 rockets being launched in attacks on the civilian populations of London and Paris. As a result, he and his top aides were jailed. Realizing the rocket program could not continue without von Braun, authorities released them in the spring of 1945. Soon afterward, von Braun and his entire team and their families, some 5,000 people, surrendered to the Americans. He became one of the more than 4,500 German army technicians brought to the United States in Operation Paperclip, and in America, von Braun became a Christian and a creationist. Dr. von Braun said that creationism is a viable scientific theory for the origin of the universe, life, and man. Speaking of how his space research only strengthened his faith in God, Dr. von Braun said, "Manned spaceflight is an amazing achievement, but it has opened for mankind thus far only a tiny door for viewing the awesome reaches of space. An outlook through this peephole at the vast mysteries of the universe should only confirm our belief in the certainty of its creator." Dr. von Braun criticized naturalistic theories, saying, "There are those who argue that the universe evolved out of a random process. But what random process could produce the brain of man, or the system of the human eye?" Dr. von Braun, in a letter to Mr. Grouse, rejected fixity of species and affirmed young Earth creationism, listing Isaac Newton as one of his favorite giants of science. Dr. von Braun recognized that uniformity in nature which is a precondition for the scientific method, is an outgrowth of Christian philosophy. In this audio clip on the religious implications of space exploration, you will hear Dr. von Braun explain how true science contributes fresh evidences of the wisdom and power of God.
I think the mainspring of science is curiosity. Since the early beginnings, there has always been men and women who felt a burning desire to know what was under the rock or beyond the hills or across the oceans. And this restless breed now wants to know what makes an atom work, or what is the geological history of the moon, or through what process does life reproduce itself, genetics. But also, there would not be a single great accomplishment in the history of mankind without faith. Any man who strives to accomplish something needs a degree of faith in himself. And whenever he takes on a challenge that requires more moral strength than he can muster, with his own limited mental and spiritual resources, then he needs faith in God. But many people find that churches, those old ramparts of faith, badly battered by the onslaught of 300 years of scientific skepticism. And this has led many to believe that science and religion are not compatible, that knowing and believing cannot live side by side. I believe that nothing could be further from the truth. Science and religion are not antagonists. On the contrary, they are sisters. While science tries to learn more about the creation, religion tries to better understand the Creator. While through science, man tries to harness the forces of nature around him, through religion, he tries to harness the force of nature.
Dr. von Braun said that the ethical principles of the Bible should guide scientific research, saying, while technology controls the forces of nature around us, ethics tries to control the forces of nature within us. The 10 Commandments are entirely adequate, without amendments, to cope with all the problems the technological revolution not only has brought up, but will bring up in the future. Concerning the Bible as a whole, Dr. von Braun concluded that the Old and New Testament are the most effective bulwark ever built against the erosive effects of time. The Bible is the revelation of God's nature and love. In a biography about Dr. von Braun, Eric Bergost wrote, prayer, too, was critically important to von Braun. Asked why his need to pray was particularly strong, he stated that he prayed a lot before and during the crucial Apollo flights. When asked about his motivation as a scientist, Dr. von Braun stated that the universe revealed through scientific inquiry is the living witness that God has indeed been at work. Understanding the nature of the creation provides a substantive basis for the faith by which we attempt to know the nature of the Creator. Dr. von Braun lived a total of 65 years and died after getting pancreatic cancer on June 16, 1977. When Dr. von Braun was finally laid to rest, his grave bore his name, the year he was born, the year he died, and one of his favorite verses. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. Thank you very much for taking the time to learn with us on current topics in science, where scientific discoveries are examined in light of the origins issue. You can find numerous biographical resources and references on Dr. von Braun in the description. Please share and subscribe to the Current Topics in Science podcast. It's available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcast, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thanks again for listening, and remember, the truth saves.